Who answers the question as to why that's happening in my life? Why is that fair? Why is that my story? When do I stop having to talk about infertility and start talking about having my baby? When or will that day ever come? And so I will tell my younger self, it's gonna suck, but you are going to find so much purpose that if and when you have a child, they will be that much more proud of you, because in your waiting season, you used your pain to help others.
You most likely know today's guest from her extensive movie and TV career, from cult favorite Hot Tub Time Machine to more recent All-American, Chicago Med, and Netflix upcoming action comedy Obliterated. But you might not know her role in fertility education and advocacy. Kellee Stewart took from her personal egg freezing journey a passion for helping others learn more about their family building options. Welcome to the show, Kellee.
Hi, thank you for having me, Laura. I'm really, really excited to have this conversation.
I first saw you talk about fertility in Chiquita Lockley's film, Eggs Over Easy. And you blew me away. I have been in the fertility world for over 20 years, and you brought up something that I thought was absolutely brilliant. You talked about an egg shower.
Yes.
And I thought that was a brilliant idea. I want to hear more about that and just all that you have done. But tell me more about that egg shower idea.
When I was 37 years old, I ended a 7-year relationship. And when that was over, knowing that I always wanted to be a mother, but now I was single and living in LA, which is a whole other kind of podcast, I decided to preserve my potential fertility and freeze my eggs. In the situation that I was in, I actually took one of those credit card applications that we frequently get in the mail, and I filled them all out, and whoever gave me the most amount of money is the one that I signed up for, and put my whole egg freezing journey on that one card. That being said, and working in the television industry that I work in, sometimes I'm blessed enough to get a job that pays the money that I could pay that right off. And when I began speaking publicly about my journey, about fertility advocacy, there were so many people that brought up a really good point, which is, how do I pay for this? If my insurance is not stepping up to the plate, if this is not something that fits into my financial portfolio, how do I pay for this? And I automatically started thinking about how much money I spend on baby showers, engagement parties, wedding gifts, and I'm celebrating everybody else's life choice. Now, I love to do it. We do it with joy and compassion, and we're really excited to celebrate. But when I froze my eggs, Hallmark doesn't make a card to congratulate me for that. And so one of the things I thought was, hey, my journey is just as valid as somebody else's pregnancy. So throw yourself an egg shower. And if you have to register at PayPal.com or Venmo.com instead of Target or Babies R Us, so do it. Where there's a will, there's a way. And then I wound up throwing a public egg shower. I partnered with a fertility clinic, Lora Fertility Care, and we threw a public egg shower, and we actually gave away a free egg freezing cycle. And I hope it's something that catches on, not just for individuals, but also for clinics out there that are offering these services to people.
Absolutely. What we need is universal coverage for fertility, because the World Health Organization defines infertility as a disease that can be treated with medication, but yet only 19 states have any sort of mandated coverage. So that's a long-term answer, but in the short term, I love the idea of being creative in ways to find the funding that you need, because you don't have time to wait. That's the whole point about egg freezing. How did you learn about egg freezing? Had your friends done it? Did you talk to people about it?
I spoke to a few people, but none of my friends had done it. And it was one of those things that just watching different things on television, I'm an independent researcher. I knew I always wanted to have a child one day, and that my circumstances weren't lining up with that plan. So I needed to find what my options were, what that alternative was. After the breakup, it was around Christmas time. And so I called my mom. I lovingly call her Mama Stu, and I flew her from Philadelphia to Los Angeles to go through the process with me. I did my research. I asked a lot of questions of the doctor. I am a very proud patient to say, like, what's going on before I do any of this. And once I learned that this was a viable option for me, all egg puns intended, then it was something that I chose to do. And I was 37. I yielded 32 eggs and 29 were viable and successfully frozen.
That is an incredible outcome. That's a lot of eggs for anyone. So I'm curious, what did you learn about your eggs and your reproduction? And I think one of the coolest things about going through an egg freezing process is learning all of the things that we did not learn in health class.
One of the things that really stands out for me when you ask that question is that we learn about sex education, but we don't learn about reproductive health. That is not taught to us at all. So I did not know about AMH hormone levels, anti-Müllerian hormone. I didn't know about follicle stimulating hormones. I really want to mention the fact that I wasn't really clear as a 37-year-old woman that we are born with as many eggs as we're ever going to have. And the reason that I have no shame in saying that is because the education system in terms of reproductive health is so not there that you can be of advanced age and not really know how all of your parts work. I didn't know about follicular atresia. I didn't know about fibroids, endometriosis in terms of what they really were. I heard the terms. I didn't know that intercourse that is painful is a sign of an underlying condition. It's not that your partner is too big. It's not that, this isn't working the way you want it to work. It's like, no, it's probably indicating that there could be adenomyosis or something else going on. So once I started to learn everything that I knew that the woman sitting to the left and the right of me didn't know, that's when I knew it was time for me to do some more independent research and start speaking publicly about these issues.
I see patients every day that just assume that because their mom had them when they were over 40, that their fertility was going to be the same. How did that make you feel? What was the emotion that you felt when you started to learn these things and realize what you didn't know?
I was hurt and I was disenchanted and I was overwhelmed because it's one thing to not learn it in our educational system. It's another thing to not learn it in our healthcare system, meaning when I'm going to my annual gynecological appointment and the doctor is looking at my age and saying, oh, you have time, but has no idea whether or not I have a blocked fallopian tube, a fibroid, endometriosis, all the things I named before. And so you're kind of, like you said, you're kind of walking through life assuming that everything's okay. And then the other reason that it hurt me is because I thought about my mom, the generations above me. My mother was given a partial hysterectomy. And at the time, I was a child, and her gynecologist told her, well, we've had a lot of cases of cervical cancer. And so this is something we're doing as a preventative measure. Now, as a Black female in this country, and that's another part of this conversation, the inequities that go on and how quickly they will take a uterus from a Black woman was a whole nother host of things that, for a lack of a better phrase here, pissed me off and hurt my feelings. And it really became a part of my advocacy because not only did I not get the education in school with my doctor, but my mom didn't have the education to pass on to me. And one of the things that I always say is that people don't cross the fertility bridge until they come to it. We need to start talking about these issues before we get to the bridge.
How do we change that?
One of the reasons that the egg shower is important to me and is something that I really want to put out in this space is because I think we need to start celebrating our journeys, even if they're painful and difficult. Now, I'm going to preface that by saying that not everybody should be invited into your infertility journey because not everybody understands the nuances, the emotionality, and the pain that goes into this process. So you have to be mindful of the people that you surround yourself with, because you need all of the encouragement and the support, especially when your body is going through difficult changes, your relationships, your partnerships, however you, being a single parent by choice, however you're doing this process, right? But I think introducing something like an egg shower, an IVF shower, an adoption shower, a foster care shower, introducing it in this space, all of a sudden gives somebody permission to celebrate their courage, to celebrate their bravery, to come out of the suffering in silence mode, first within yourself, and then to create the empathy for others that are going through this. So I think it is a systemic problem because it's something that we don't talk about. I was at a wedding recently, and the bride's mom, when she gave a speech, said, "I'm so glad you guys finally got married. We're so happy everybody's here tonight, and I can't wait to be a grandmother." And then so did cousin this person and auntie this person. And they've only been married, under 2 years. And I finally got the call, we're going through IVF. And so when we make that assumption, like you've said before, we put people in a silent mode because now they think they're failing, not just their own body, but mom wants to be a grandmom. My sister wants to be an aunt. My brother wants to be an uncle. So there's a shame attached to it. So I think, number one, speaking up for yourself, but also creating initiatives like egg showers, like conversations like this podcast, help not only the patient go through it, but also the people that are there to support the patient.
How were the reactions from your loved ones about your egg freezing?
My mom was super excited. One of the things that she said to the doctor during retrieval day when I woke up, she said, you got 32 eggs, and he came in and he confirmed that. Well, here's a funny story. This is what happened. When they were putting me to sleep, and like I said, I'm a bad patient. I'm going to ask a lot of questions. I'm going to be aggressive. And so I'm aggressive even when they're putting me to sleep. And I wasn't fully asleep, and they turned the lights out in the surgical room. Now, I'm not expecting that to happen. My doctor had a headband on with a light on it, and all of a sudden the lights go out, and I said, "What the?" I won't curse on the podcast. Who turned out the damn lights? And the next thing I know, I'm waking up in recovery. I have no idea how much I screamed at them, if I moved in the bed. So when he came in and he said, "Yes, you got 32 eggs," the first thing I said was, "Why the hell did you turn off the lights?" And he explained to me that he likes to retrieve the eggs in the dark because we're mimicking nature as much as possible, and our eggs live inside of our body in the dark. And he looked at my mom and he said, "She's a feisty one." And my mom said, "Who are you telling? Because if they were doing this procedure back in my day, her ass would still be frozen." And I learned, number one, how cool it was that my mom got to witness and be a part of this process that was not available to her. My father was really into it, doesn't understand it, but wrote a check. My brother was giving me the thumbs up. I got nothing but positive reactions. Nothing negative came. Now, when I came into this space publicly, that's when the negativity came. You're trying to do what God's work is. If God wanted you to have a baby, you would have had one by now. You shouldn't be pushing this. What I want to make clear is I never tell people to freeze their eggs. That's a personal, financial, and sometimes a spiritual decision. It's your body. It's not my job to tell you what to do with it. And I'm not your doctor. So it's not my job to even suggest what an option would be for you. What I do advocate for is reproductive health knowledge. And I tell my story, my choice, what I chose to do with my body, how it affected me, and how I do not regret it. And so I share my truth about it as much as possible.
For too long, infertility has been seen in the public as a white woman's problem. And the celebrities that we've seen the most talking about it have been Sarah Jessica Parker and Nicole Kidman, and most recently Jennifer Aniston. But this is not a white woman's issue. This is an issue for everyone. And what have you learned? What makes the Black stories different?
Our stories are different because of how this country was fundamentally, when we go back even to the time of enslaved Africans and what this country calls the father of gynecology was doing procedures without anesthesia to serve the medical care of their white female masters. That internal bias, it may not be at the surface of most, but it is at the surface of many. And we need to be very honest about the fact that Black women's pain often isn't believed. We need to be honest about the fact that Black women are known, it's a fact, to die 3 times more likely to go through death from childbirth, to have preeclampsia and all of these different things that are happening. There are internal biases that affect our care. I don't necessarily know if healthcare is really for me in this country. And the reason that I say that is I feel safer going to a doctor that looks like me. That's the truth. Now, that shouldn't offend anybody else. It should be something that makes people say, okay, how can I be an ally? How can I change the fact that whether I participated in it or not, I live in or work in a medical community whereby some people do not feel safe and that they're going to get the proper care from me, even though I take an oath, even though I'm here to do my job. We have to understand that these biases are real and they get into the psyche of the Black and brown patients that walk into these rooms. Regina Townsend, who is the creator of the Broken Brown Egg, she said to a room full of fertility clinics, if I go into your waiting room, if I see stock photos of blonde, blue-eyed babies, and I don't see any stock images of brown-skinned Indian babies, I don't feel welcome.
The biases that are there actually harm the fertility of the Black women, because if you're in fear of going to a doctor because you're going to be discriminated against, or you're going to get the assumption like, oh, you're young, you're fine, we don't need to do any testing, in their head, oh, they're Black, they're brown, they're more fertile anyway, just all these inherent biases that delays seeking care, delays testing, whether it's patient fear not showing up to ask questions or advocate, or it's the doctor's inherent bias of not doing the test that should be done. That's why it's so powerful that you are speaking out and that we see people like Michelle Obama talking about her infertility. I read that in her autobiography before it was announced anywhere. It was only 2 pages. I almost dropped the book. I mean, because I admire that woman so much. I struggle with infertility. I see her as this incredibly successful woman, driven, and just, oh my gosh, she had infertility too. Wow. And it's powerful, but it's even more important to see people that look like you. I felt that in medicine. I was drawn to fields of medicine that had more female doctors and more female mentors. And you see that everywhere. Anything that we can do, that's the power of sharing the stories.
A mother in her 40s brought in her 13-year-old daughter to Dr. Cindy's office because she had yet to start her cycle. And she brought her in to get examined for that. And after doing the examination, Dr. Cindy saw something that she knew she needed to take the mother into a private room and tell her privately. And she said to her, I'm so sorry to tell you this. It's going to break your heart, but your daughter was born without ovaries. And so therefore she does not have eggs. She'll never have a cycle. And she will not have a child naturally on her own. And Dr. Duke spoke to her, handed her a box of tissues, because this is news that you never expect to hear, that a mother is going to think, why can't I change this outcome? What do you mean? Does that even exist? How is it possible? All of those things. And then Dr. Duke said to her, however, even though you are in somewhat advanced age, there is a possibility if you wanted to freeze your eggs and bank as many as possible, if we did a couple of rounds, that if we find some healthy eggs, we can store them for her. And when the time comes, she will at least know that her mother created this beautiful option for her. She can try and have children that are biologically connected to her. Now, after I got done crying, I couldn't help but think, first of all, it takes a compassionate human. I don't care what race you are, right? And empathetic, and somebody that's really thinking outside of the box of just, I'm going to give you this news and send you home and you figure it out later. Those are the things that it made me so happy Dr. Duke was her doctor. Also thought about, what about the thousands and millions of girls that have MRKH that may not have someone on the other side of the desk that has that insight and that compassion. I have a friend of mine that is struggling with PCOS, but she never knew, has gone to a doctor for years and said, I'm gaining weight, I have acne, I have all these things, and was never told, hey, we need to do some testing because I think there's something else going on. I had to tell her, you have all the signs of PCOS. Why is there a disconnect here? And I don't know, Lora, if that's something that you can speak to.
When you told your story, there's probably a lot of doctors out there that would have a financial bias against that Black mom and her 13-year-old daughter. They wouldn't maybe bring up egg freezing because they would just assume that they wouldn't be able to afford it, or they just wouldn't have even ever thought to think about that as an incredible gift, whether it's a emotional bias or financial bias or just an assumption. You're right. Like you say, it's important. You're not telling people to freeze their eggs. You're sharing reproductive education and your own story. It's Dr. Duke is going through options and bringing up things that other people might not have. You're right. And what we can do about that is we need to talk more about it. There's no question in medical school, we need more education on empathy. We need more education on the importance of diversity. We need more understanding about bias, because if you aren't aware of it, you can't see it in yourself. And if we don't see it in ourselves, nothing is going to change.
And people are afraid to have this conversation, and they're afraid to see it in themselves. This goes back to the whole suffering in silence thing, whether it's about, I can't have a baby, my body is failing me, or I'm suffering in silence because as a person of color, I don't feel seen or heard or valued by my doctor. When I go in a waiting room, everybody around me doesn't look like me, but I don't know how to speak up for that because I've lost my voice in that. You know what I mean? So there's so much that goes on. And I feel like we're talking about egg showers and we're talking about advocacy. And part of that advocacy is having difficult conversations about race in the infertility community, about the effects that it has on everybody's psyche and the biases that even I need to look at with myself. I can't go into an office and assume that because somebody doesn't look like me, they don't care about me or I'm not going to get the proper care. It may be my story and it may have facts to it. But if I'm meeting somebody new, I need to at least grant the grace that maybe this will be a different experience.
What would you share with your younger self, Kellee? Anything that you've learned more recently and wish that you'd learned earlier?
Everything is going to get screwed up. It is not going to happen the way that you thought it would, the way that you want it to, or the way that your ego felt you deserved it should happen. In the human experience, you are dealt a set of cards. And until it's time for you to play, you don't know what card you're going to throw out. You don't know what's in your hand. And it's going to be painful. And you will find a way to take that pain and put it to purpose. I'm going to share in my own vulnerable way. You mentioned Eggs Over Easy. Eggs Over Easy was also produced by the lovely Keisha Knight Pulliam, who we all know as Rudy from The Cosby Show. Keisha and I were working on a movie together, and she asked me to be a part of Eggs Over Easy. At the time, I of course said yes, I would be happy to share my egg story. But as we were filming, there was a gentleman by the name of Brad who was in the cast that I kept seeing him look at Keisha across the room. And I said to her, I think Brad has like a total big crush on you. And she's like, no, he doesn't. Well, it turns out he did. They got married. And then Keisha was producing the film and didn't know that she wasn't just lending her production and her voice to narrate, but now she was going to be a part of it because she wanted to have a baby with Brad. Had to use assisted reproduction. And just yesterday, Keisha announced her pregnancy. And she's a dear friend of mine, and I'm watching her on the Tamron Hall show, crying tears, talking about it, watching Brad come out, and they're having the conversation about how they met on set and when she found out he had a crush, and I was a part of that. I was there. And I looked at my mom who was sitting next to me, and I was so happy for my friend. I'm so happy for my friend. So when you ask me, what would I tell my younger self? I would say, you're going to be so happy for your friend and so sad at the same time. And you're going to look at your mom and you're going to say, see, I was there before they even got married. And I still don't have the partner to the baby. My eggs are still frozen. And I'm doing all of this advocacy and it hasn't happened for me yet. Where do I put that? Who answers the question as to why that's happening in my life? Why is that fair? Why is that my story? When do I stop having to talk about infertility and start talking about having my baby? When or will that day ever come? And so I will tell my younger self, it's gonna suck. But you are going to find so much purpose that if and when you have a child, they will be that much more proud of you. Because in your waiting season, you used your pain to help others and to celebrate people, even when it was breaking your heart at the same time.
Kellee, I'd love to hear from you how things could change in the Black community around fertility and shame and what we can do to help.
One of the things is to approach it from a human experience versus from a racial experience. And the reason that I say that is that we're all human first, okay? But I'm not a white woman. You're not a Black woman. So our experiences as humans vastly differ. Start with the commonality. Start with the human thing. And after a patient of color is in your care, and when the stirrups are out and they're getting themselves dressed, to be able to say, do you feel seen? Do you feel heard? Do you have any other questions or concerns? Because I am here for you. And just know, if you have any questions or concerns along the way, you can always reach out. You can always double book an appointment. Keep a journal of what's going on with your body so that when I see you next year for your annual pap smear, I'll know everything that's going on. Just by saying to someone, do you feel seen? Do you feel heard? And do you have any other questions? From a human experience, that language to you all of a sudden wakes you up. I matter. So now I can start to, one, feel safer, which is what we talked about earlier. Now you're human to me. And I can start to maybe say, hey, I do have a concern actually. Or feel the freedom to call you if something changes in my body. Or to recommend you to my Black and brown friends, because I have this kick-ass doctor, and even though she doesn't look at me, you know what she said to me after the appointment? Do you feel seen? Do you feel heard? And do you have any other questions that I can answer for you? Just be human.
I always say, have all your questions been answered? And I want my patients to feel seen and heard, and I think I'm doing an okay job, but man, why not just say it? Exactly. Like, do you feel seen? Do you feel heard? Well, I cannot thank you enough for being here and just being such a powerful presence in this fertility community. And I would love for my listeners to know where to find you next.
Everybody can follow me on Instagram at kstew222. Also, the website is warrior-wednesdays with an S, that's plural, warrior-wednesdays.com. I haven't gone live in a while. I've been taking a little bit of self-care, but they will be starting back up very soon for 2023. So come join me if you have a story to share. If you have any questions, really come and see the doctors that come on. We have a great time. We cry tears like I did earlier in the podcast, but we also have so many stories of hope. And that's one thing that I will leave you with, that as many stories of challenge and struggle, pain, tears, and loss that I hear twice as many stories of hope and miracles and moments where people never thought they would either have a baby, adopt a baby, or build their family. And some way, somehow, it happened. And that's what I hold on to when my tears fall. And that's what these conversations do for others. So thank you again so much for having me. It's been a pleasure and an honor.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Kellee Stewart as much as I did. She is such a passionate fertility advocate, all by accident. She took her egg freezing journey and the anger that she felt with her lack of knowledge about her reproduction into advocacy, sharing stories and educating others. She's a true inspiration. I'm your host, Dr. Lora Shahine, and this is Baby or Bust. Baby or Bust is produced by Mark Ramsey, Jamie Solis, and Greg Moga. Executive produced by Paul Anderson and Nick Pinella for Workhouse Media. Baby or Bust is a Mark Ramsey media production.